A lot to digest. The biggest story after a minutes-long MALLER review of the day, the biggest story, the clash of big-name coaches. Now, this might have been the greatest game in the world and all that. There was a late lead change. I think there were like 10 lead changes in the game. But the big-name coach, which is what we put our hat on here, you had John Calipari on one side making his tournament debut as Arkansas's coach, and Bill Self, the staple of Kansas basketball in Lawrence, Kansas, home of a Ben Maller food dish there at the Bird in Lawrence. So someone named Jonas, it's not Jonas Knox, it's Jonas Idu, scored 22 points, and Arkansas came back and ends up winning 79-72 in the opening round of the tournament. So the number 10 seed knocks off the number 7 seed Kansas. The better story in the losing locker room, so that is where we will focus on this particular game. The Jayhawks eliminated from the madness of March, and now the questions are being asked, will they be rebooting the coaching staff? What? All right, so let us discuss. Anytime a big-name coach gets excommunicated from the tournament early on, you ask the question, we will ask the question, is the venerable Bill Self on the hot seat at Kansas? So I've got toothpaste, biblical, and Venn diagram. And we will combine all of these things together, and we are going to make some banana cream pie. The king of all pies is the banana cream pie, and it does appear that Kansas took a banana cream pie to the face. All right, so A, to answer the question, is Bill Self on the hot seat at Kansas? I am nodding my head yes. I am nodding my head yes. Now, this is only the second time that the Associated Press preseason number 1 team has lost in the first round of the tournament. The only Kansas, by the way, was that team. They were preseason number 1. They're out first game of the tournament. The only other time in the history of the tournament it's happened was Bill Self and Kansas back in 2005. They lost to Bucknell. And so there you go, a little fun factoid for you. But I want you to turn up your headphones a little bit, because you're going to hear in the background, we talk about Bill Self and his status, you'll hear the sound of crackling geese. You hear that little sound, crackling geese. Now, you know what that means, right? That means storm clouds are building. And this was Kansas' worst season, according to many pundits, and the numbers bear this out, in the 22 years with Bill Self at the helm. That's a generation of Bill Self coaching Kansas basketball. But it cuts deeper. And I go back to the D word. Darwinism. Adapt or die is the way I look at this. And the NIL, which has been around for a few years now, but the name, image, likeness thing has been a gigantic sea change for the old guard in college sports. And we've seen a lot of them leave. But you look at a guy like Bill Self, who's been around and around and around and around and around, and you don't necessarily like it. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter. It's not up for debate. This is the way college athletics are. And despite Nick Saban and other prominent college figures of years gone by going to Capitol Hill, you're not going to be able to put the toothpaste back in the tube. The toothpaste is out of the tube. You can't put it back in. It's going to be all messy and you're sloppy, the whole thing. So Bill Self, Coach Self, has been unable to consistently keep up with the new ecosystem in college basketball. And Bill Self and Kansas now, they've lost the first weekend, not the first game, but the first weekend in 5 of the last 6 NCAA tournaments. So 5 out of 6, they're done they don't even get to the Sweet 16. And you look around, and there are some big-time jobs open. So this could be like a lateral move. The one that I was texting some of my college basketball people. I watch the tournament, but I'm not obsessing on every single college basketball game. And the job that kept popping up with Bill Self was the Texas Longhorns job. They lost in the tournament, and there's a lot of chatter that there's going to be a coaching change if it hasn't already happened in Austin. So Bill Self could just move to that job. And there's some other prominent gigs that are either open or will be open. So there's some opportunities there if Self wants to have an exit stage right. He can do that. Now, page 2. Give me the good, the bad, and the ugly from day number 1 of March Madness. Number 1. We'll start with the good. I'll be Benny Brightside. So the good, we had another heavyweight coaching matchup secured. And I'm all about the matchups, boss. Now, this doesn't necessarily reflect what happened on Thursday, but it is a direct reflection of the events of Thursday. Because of wins on day 1, Arkansas, if you look at your bracket, Arkansas and St. John's will face off on Saturday in the second round of tournament play. Now, to me, that's a great thing because you've got John Calipari, big-name coach, versus Rick Pitino. And I got St. John's going, right there all the way. So I was a little concerned early on when Omaha had an early lead. But, it's college basketball, so who cares about the first 5 minutes? In many cases, the first 10 minutes or the 20 minutes, who cares? But Rick Pitino versus John Calipari will play on Saturday because of what happened on Thursday, and that'll be the 24th time they will have gotten together, but the first time in almost a decade. Last time, Pitino was at Louisville, and Coach Cal was, I believe, that was back, Kentucky still, back in 2016. Now, the bad to the bone, that would be the Atlantic Coast Conference. Now, in my lifetime, for much of my adult life, that was the gold standard of NCAA basketball, right? And there's a biblical expression that applies here, how the mighty have fallen. Now, maybe it's just an off year, but you had Louisville, the number 8 seed, lost to number 9 Creighton early on. You had Clemson, the number 5 seed. That was the biggest upset of the day. They were getting just absolutely destroyed. It ended up being a closer final score, but McNeese, formerly known as McNeese State, the number 12 seed, knocked Clemson out. So that means now, if my Maller math is correct, and I am Benny Bractologist, so half of the ACC contingent has already vacated the field. Half. That means that you only have the number 1 seed, Duke, and the number 11 seed, North Carolina, and the Tar Heels. They had to win in that Fugazi first 4 game the other night just to get to this point. So, now why is it so bad? As a distant relative of Nostradamus and friend of Nostradamus, I will tell you, going back and looking at my crystal ball, why things are so bad. In the last 4 years, the ACC has said bye-bye to Coach K, Roy Williams, Tony Bennett, Jim Boeheim. You can go down. Leonard Hamilton had some success at times. He's also gone. Jim Larinaga. I'm sure I'm missing somebody else as well. They've all retired. They've all checked out. I'm done. That's it. Now, the ugly, and if you look at my big board here, not a list, my big board, this is debatable. I could have flipped the ACC, the bad with the ugly. But I'm going to go with carpet-bagging coaches who it's just a flavor of college sports. It's like you don't need to really learn the names of the players or the coaches because they're always changing. And the carpet-bagging coaches in March Madness, you had Will Wade. Boy, what a scandal he was at LSU back in the day. So Will Wade is the coach at McNeese, formerly McNeese State. So he has agreed to take the job at North Carolina State. So that's a better job for him. But the announcement coming down as McNeese pulled off this win in the tournament, then there's a guy named Ben McCollum, who is in a similar situation, although it's not a done deal, we are told, for him. This guy McCollum is the coach at Drake. He's in his first season at Drake. Not Drake. Just like the musician everyone likes to pick on, the Canadian guy. So he has been connected to the Iowa job. Holy Hawkeyes, Batman. And he doesn't have the job yet, but it seems to be almost a done deal. He was born in Iowa City. I was reading a little bit about this. Guy's from Iowa City, and he grew up in the state. It just seems like a natural thing considering Iowa poleaxed their head coach. So it seems that that's going to happen. Now, the last word here. We enjoy the tournament. I've certainly, the first couple days, always enjoyable. Always enjoyable. This was not like anything outrageous. I would say this was a pretty benign day one overall of March Madness, with the lack of dramatic, buzzer beaters and all that stuff. There were so many missed layups. I had my little notes thing app. I was futzing around my phone trying to count all the missed layups, and I just gave up. The answer's a lot. There were a lot of missed layups. But what is the big takeaway from the start of March Madness 2025? I'm glad you asked. It's time now for a Ben Maller Show PSA. A Ben Maller Show public service announcement. Yeah. So consider this my good mitts for the day. It is a reminder. I do this at one point during the year, much like the Swallows returning Capistrano, or will Punxsutawney Phil see his shadow? Will we have more winter? These things are traditional. So if you look at my Venn diagram here, the NCAA tournament is different than almost every other sporting event. Every other sporting event starts out and builds up to a crescendo, right? You start out, there's a little like baseball. Baseball, okay, opening day, you pay a little attention, and you see how your team's doing, and then you check back every once in a while, and then you build up to the playoffs, and then ultimately the World Series. So you're building up to this thing where most things in life start out small and then gradually increase, and they get to that climax, right? This is the opposite. Public support for March Madness is directly related. There's a correlation to how your bracket is doing. And it is the only thing I can, maybe some NASCAR people have challenged me over this. What about the Daytona 500? Boogity, boogity, boogity. Okay. But if you're a real NASCAR fan, you're going to watch, and there's the playoff, and you're into that whole thing. So I don't consider it the same thing, right? This is a situation where we start out Thursday and now going into Friday, peak interest, fully attentive, and the deeper we get into the weeds of the NCAA tournament, the less interest we have, depending on how your bracket's crumpled up and you've just been absolutely destroyed on your picks. And also, if you're in an office pool, you get those squares, those square things and all that. Yeah.